Everybody, this is Craig and AI with Dr. Craig. I'm delighted to have Kunal and Wes with me, incredible innovators and educational leaders. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, I am excited to share about what we're doing here in Orange County, California. My background's high school English teacher and then into ed tech the last 20 years, supporting adults with technology so that they can have innovative student environments. And when I came to Orange County Department of Ed, Kunal was not here yet. I was hired in November. He came in December. And so for my entry plan, I devised something called 100 Conversations about AI in 100 Days. And so I had been working in Orange County for 10 years. And so I started with my network and I started to interview people I knew. How are you using AI? How do you see it affecting education? What are the obstacles to adoption? And then I asked them with a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens is to recommend 3 people I should interview who are different from them, different from me, so that we kind of get more diverse perspectives. And so we are about 50 conversations in, and I could tell you probably, I think Kunal really like hit the nail on the head. After 30, there were some real strong trends, right? And that was middle management was paralyzed. I will use that word, is they wanted their approval from their bosses. They have some eager teachers, but they didn't feel empowered to act. And there was a lot of kind of fear from everyone. That was another trend. And then pockets of innovation, of course, as always, people trying to experiment with it. So Kunal had this idea. He said, well, instead of 100 conversations being the whole kind of idea of learning the foundation of what's going on in Orange County, he's like, you have enough where you can kind of see some trends. He's like, why don't you take the next 30 and then start to engage people in using AI together in addition to the interview? Because I would always analyze the transcript with ChatGPT and send them kind of an analysis of their views on leadership and innovation. And everybody was very, very like, oh, I love how that sounds. That really, ChatGPT gets me. Just from a simple like analyze and the speaker's name. And so then we've been in the middle really trying to do more hands-on work together with chat. And it's kind of this theory that Kunal and I have is the triangle is if we have 2 people and chat and we're working together on prompts, it changes the nature of the relationship between us because it's less adversarial and less tension around that's my idea, that's your idea. So we've actually presented to counselors about how to use it as a tool working with counseling. I've actually been shadowing classified, well, we call them classified employees, but office administrators or office assistants. And I have them share their link to their chat so that I can see how they're using chat. So it's this triangle where I can give them feedback on how they're using it, but also I'm able to learn about their work. And so that structure, I think, is interesting. I was just in a new employee orientation and I brought laptops with chat 4 and a GPT I built. And I told them, hey, this we'll tell you everything about our organization for these new employees. And they said, let's work together and think of some questions to ask it so they could understand our division. So these are some examples of this triangle structure where 2 users use chat and it changes the dynamic. So that's something I'm excited about. The conversations are getting more into where we're having students partner with us to help produce a podcast. And so some of the people I've been lucky to meet, we've recruited a couple of people to host an IT and AI podcast. So that's going to be coming out. So I'm really excited about that. I always, my 2 sentences I kind of live by is all we need is a network. Yeah, like if we can all just share ideas, and then the product is the people, which is there is no like AI platform that's going to solve everything. But if we invest in people, that's going to be the best gift we have to the education community. So that's kind of my approach. And Kunal is so different than me. No, I was kidding. But I love his background. So it's way different than mine in terms of the last 10 years specifically.
Yeah. So I was in education. So I was a high school teacher, high school principal, assistant principal in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area in California. And then for the last 10 years, I've actually been in Silicon Valley companies and tech companies in the Bay Area, and working on their education. They all had education foundations or education initiatives. And so I was kind of strategically hired to be in that space. And so first off, I was always the former teacher. So everybody had questions for me. Everybody else had a tech background. And so they all had questions for me because none of them had any idea what it was like to be an actual teacher. But it really opened me up to I don't like the term ed tech. Because I think it kind of doesn't give justice to either side of that, the tech side or the ed side. I like to think of them as education and technology, and where they meet together. To me, is still education. It's actually not technology at all. Technology is the vehicle through which education comes, but it's not a thing. And I don't think it's a thing in and of itself. And that's, a very similar idea to what these generative AI tools are, and AI in general in education is. It's not something separate from education. It's just another vehicle. It's just another way to see yourself, to reflect on yourself and your own work, see yourself where you are educationally, and then really figure out what your goals are, what you care about. And sometimes what we have found, Wes and I have found, and I'm sure you found it too, is that reflective power that AI has is deeply uncomfortable to a lot of people. The idea that you really have to think about what you care about, what values you hold, and that's what's going to inform your interactions and your growth with artificial intelligence. And if you don't have any of those things squared away, then you just see it as another tool, right? It's like this inert Google Docs or Microsoft Office or whatever it might be. But when you actually start to invite AI into the room, it starts to ask you a lot of questions about yourself, and you have to be ready to reflect on that.
It's really interesting. So with this triangle model, is this something that you're sitting in a Board of Education office there in Orange County? So are you rolling that out as a model, as a practice that schools should be using? Are you training principals, administrators to use that? And do you have use cases and case studies like you're talking about in your office where people are doing it and these are the good outcomes?
Yeah, so one of the examples, this would be kind of an elongated triangle, is we interviewed a student named Kieran, and he was recommended to us by a teacher because we interviewed the teacher, part of the 100 conversations, and we said, we're looking for students who are using ChatGPT, using generative AI, and they're just obsessed. And he's like, well, no one's really allowed to use it. We don't, we don't, what's the I was thinking about We Don't Talk About Bruno.
Yeah.
that animated movie. But he said, wait, there is a student who's always on ChatGPT in the hallways whenever I walk by. I had him as a student 2 years ago. So we met with Kieran, and he said, I've not talked to anybody about this, right? So this is him in chat, and now
Wow.
he's finally telling the story. He said a year ago, I was just a person with no imagination. I didn't like writing. You give me a writing assignment, I wouldn't do it. I would just feel stymied. But when chat came out, I wondered if it could help me write stories like about the anime that I loved. And so he just started writing every day. ChatGPT, write me a story about this world and this villain. And he would spend hours every day creating stories and worlds. Kind of like how
Wow.
video game companies have like people who create worlds for their games. So he's practicing the skill, and he goes, my life changed, and I knew it when the day the English teacher gave a final verbally in class, said, hey, we're all going to write this final exam. And he said, I took the paper and the pen and I wrote not just 5 paragraphs, but I wrote 7 paragraphs in 10 minutes. And that's not the type of person I had been before. I just knew my brain had been rewired through this constant use and reading of the stories that I was hungry for. And so as he told us that, we realized, there's this power for students to use this to kind of serve their own reading interest, but also then serve kind of the greater good of improving their reading abilities. So we have a reading model that we call the K+ model that we're doing pilots here in 5 districts in Orange County, where it is the teachers trained. So that's kind of the triangle, and they're going to talk with their student about how to use ChatGPT, but really the student is training the chat. Here's what I'm interested in reading. Here's my reading level, and then I want you to quiz me, et cetera, like help me measure my comprehension, so that the student is really training the AI on its own, but then the teacher is actually this third part, because they're kind of the educational partner who has the accountability for the student's progress. So that's one place that we're rolling out the kind of the triangle model. I would love a better name for it.
Yeah, I know, the triangle. He called it the drama triangle, which is like the two people talking about a third person and gossiping about them. So he was like, remember that gossip drama triangle? We're doing a different version.
It's not a good name.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably come up with a better name. But I think the counseling example is another one where it really, we ran a session. I mean, I don't know how many people there were. In the first session, there were probably 150, yeah, 150 or so. In the second session, maybe about 30 or 40. But we ran these sessions with counselors where we showed them this triangle. And rather than it being, hey, I'm the counselor, this is what I think you should do. I'm the student, this is what I think I should do. And then figuring out how to strategically have that battle. Rather, you have this third party, essentially this therapist in a way, but it's not really a therapist because you're not asking anything of it. You're rather just saying, this is what I think, this is what I think. Let's put it in this thing, this robot mind, and let's see what it comes up with. And then let's both analyze what it came up with together. And what that does in that moment is not only does it offer, this sort of kind of and I don't know, it's
de-escalates the tension between, right. Like if he's my counselor and he says, you should go to medical school, and I just want to be an artist, I might find it difficult to push back on the adult and say, I don't like your idea. But when it's kind of in this disembodied chatbot, we both have access to play with ideas. And I kind of think that we're better humans when we're in a play space and we're less serious and we're less tied to our roles.
And in that moment, when the counselor is actually looking at what ChatGPT came up with, and saying, I'm wondering, and starts to analyze that in front of the student. Now the student, maybe for the first time in their interactions with that counselor, actually sees the counselor interacting with real information and struggling with how best to serve the student. Again, not in an adversarial way, in the sense of like, you said this, now I'm going to say this, but rather in this third party way where the teacher is looking and saying, I don't know if that's the right thing, because I know you like this, and I know that you told me about this other thing that you liked before, and you don't like this stuff. And so then now the student looks and they think, wow, this counselor actually cares about me. Like this counselor isn't just saying what they want to say because they want to have some kind of power over me, which is what a lot of students might think, or feel like they're just an authority figure and they're whatever it is. They actually care about me. And for a lot of students, that might be the first time that they ever actually had that realization that the counselor actually genuinely cares about them. But again, going back to the reflection piece, that means that the counselor genuinely does have to care about the student, which I think in most cases is true, but maybe in some cases it's less so.
Yeah.
I think there's two parts to that. As you were talking, that affirming the counselor does care about me, that relationship building is really important. Also, the counselor is modeling being inquiring.
Yeah,
I love it.
Inquiring and
Inquiry
questioning.
triangle.
Yeah.
Better
Yes.
name. Triangle of inquiry.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. Craig,
You can use that.
There's 3 of us here.
Copyright it quick.
Triangle of inquiry. It's toy.
Toy.
Whoa, that's awesome.
We love acronyms.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Hey, so with this, the triangle, the chat, is it general chat GPT online, or is it a knowledge base that's got specific content in there that's tailored for that area, that learning area?
So right now it's general, where in most cases it's general, but now with custom GPTs being available and counselors who have access to ChatGPT-4, which is becoming more and more regular, being able to create custom GPTs. We've suggested that counselors actually create either custom GPTs or specific chats for every student. And so you'll have a nice long history. Again, don't use identifiable information, things like that. Make sure you respect the privacy of the student. But you can actually create a long running student specific base of, the knowledge is still coming from ChatGPT's training data, but now kind of the affect of what comes out, the specifics of knowing what the student is going to appreciate and enjoy, that's going to be more specific. We suggest that in the example we did in the sessions, we had the counselor actually upload the student's transcript, upload the high school's course catalog, and then upload a local community college's course catalog as well, and then put all of that stuff into ChatGPT-4, and then start to build out potential pathways, potential future ideas, and all of that. And it created really, really rich content for the counselor and the student to work from.
Yeah.
Does every student fund their own ChatGPT-4?
Yeah, no. So at this point, in most cases, yes. But there's a couple of districts we're working with that they're starting to roll out for high school students. Specific use cases where ChatGPT-4 is paid for, but this is like we're trying to figure out how we address the equity issue here. Is like, do we address it by showing how good GPT-4 is, and therefore we need to make this accessible for everybody, or do we just go with 3.5? By the way, Kieran, the student that Wes told the story about, he did all of this on a free ChatGPT 3.5. He did not have access to 4, and he made multiple. He said he has hundreds of ChatGPT accounts because he keeps running out, and then he has to go to the next one, and he keeps a Google Doc where he keeps sort of the background of the chat in there,
like the seed of his story.
Yeah, so he can
when he starts a new account, he pastes that in and says, "Let's keep going, chat," even though my other account timed out.
Yeah, and I think this is a big question, right? Is like, how are we going to address this gap when it comes to paying for it? And especially in this current moment, I don't know how, this thing changes every day, right? So we have no idea what tomorrow's going to look like. But we wonder, like, given the gap between GPT-4 and 3.5 and most of the other models, although it looks like Gemini, Google is starting to catch up now a little bit. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I didn't see that one coming. But yeah, it's a real question of how to handle the equity issue.
So, and then another kind of angle on the equity issue is we work with districts, and I kind of identified like there's maybe a little bit of a paralysis. Like there's maybe 2-3 districts that I am aware of out of our 30 that have said, here's a blanket message across to, community, teachers, students, here's our stance on it. We're not blocking it, is kind of the usual approach. But then there's very little clarity about then what do they do with it. But we're trying to get every school district to use it at a high level for the benefit of students and families. And so we have to try to move all those districts along to getting their hands dirty, for lack of a better phrase, play with it. One of the superintendents I work with the most, Dr. Mario Carlos in La Habra, he calls it the mix of the masa. Are you familiar with making tamales?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay, all right. So in 10 seconds, tamales have a bunch of ingredients, and like there's lime to soften the corn, and at some point you start to mix it with your hands. And he gave this wonderful explanation of how it's horrible and it's filthy and there's like lard and all this. And it's like, that's what AI is right now, is we all have to get our hands on. But at some point you put it to bake and it comes out and it's delicious. And so he has this idea that we're right now in the uncomfortable, but he said in the Latino culture, that's a collaborative moment where everyone gathers around the table, everyone's hands are dirty, and everyone is working together to make this meal that is communal and celebratory, and it has a lot of nostalgia around multiple times this has come up when we do an activity called the nostalgia activity to help new groups with AI, where they write one sentence about a positive memory, and then we use the image creator, and it creates a scene from their past, and then the groups kind of get to know each other on a far different level than they would be just saying, let's do an icebreaker. And so
Love that.
making tamales has come up multiple times when people share this nostalgic activity. Even the CTO of La Habra, that was his image. And so there's a lot of resonance here in Southern California, being, at one point part of Mexico. And so we have this like kind of rich cultural image that I really love to share, because it is communal, and it is kind of like Dr. Carlos said, my daughter came to the table and said, I'm supposed to help grandma make tamales, but I've never done it before. I'm scared I'm gonna mess them up. And he's like, jump in there. Like we can't be too precious at this moment about AI. We have to get our hands dirty. We have to have real experience. We have to make, mistakes, failures. And so we're trying to share that mindset with districts, so that they don't end up here when other, countries are, it's not just about equity among students. We don't want whole neighborhoods to be, left behind because the district's leadership thought, oh, it's too early to try anything.
Right. If we just move away from toy for the moment, because that's a
Yeah.
great name. So at a teacher level, there are a range of educational platforms out there, and some of them are really gaining momentum, and we're doing some training here in New Zealand with schools around those platforms so that teachers reduce their administrative time and really take their teaching and learning and assessment materials and differentiate them. So neurodiverse students, for example, have tailor-made personalized materials. That's the real push. That's the hope and the dream. Are there particular platforms and models that you're using that you think are gaining traction for teachers?
Yeah, I think what we see right now here in the US, there's the largest one right now is Magic School, which maybe you're aware of or you've heard of at least. We are not necessarily great fans of Magic School. And the reason is because we actually feel like it takes away creative control and creativity, and it takes away your personhood when you're going into this tool. I think when we think of tools, the first thing we ask is, are you learning to interact with AI better with this tool? Are you improving your creativity, and are you central to this experience? When you look at something like Magic School, and I'm saying Magic School because it is the big one, but we do have ones that we like. So we're not just gonna say negative things about something else, but when you see something like Magic School, what you're looking at is, what we're calling thin wrapper products, right? It's just like a little thin wrapper on ChatGPT, and it's actually a thin wrapper on ChatGPT 3.5. So it's not even using ChatGPT 4 yet. And so first of all, that's already you're not even giving teachers a great experience, which to me feels a little condescending to teachers. But then also, what we're looking at is this space of teachers no longer have the capacity to build from scratch. Teachers have a chance to be programmers now, right? They get to build everything from the beginning. They get to use who they are and make that part of what their learning experience in their classroom is going to look like, and what their learning experience for the students are going to look like. If you use something like Magic School, you're actually taking away all of that, and you're using these kind of turnkey solutions. And in the end, when Magic School trains teachers, the model they use is, they say 80% use AI, and then the last 20% is the teacher, because the teacher has to, look over everything, make sure everything looks good and all that. But what is that really? That means that as a teacher, you're just an AI proofreader. You're just proofreading the content that an AI is creating. And how much longer are we going to need people to proofread AI content? Probably not much longer. It's a problem of today, but is it going to be a problem in 6 months, in a year? Maybe not. The way generative AI is moving, we may not need proofread, but we may need to be proofread by AIs in 6 months, not the other way around. And so certain tools like that are I find them, and we both find them, a little bit kind of counterintuitive. I worry specifically that we're actually kind of catalyzing teachers to get out of work because
Yeah, there's a theory, if you're saying I have a tool that will make your work more efficient, right? And we often say teachers are overworked and underpaid, and I have a tool that's going to make your work more efficient, but that doesn't really adjust the social justice lens on what we're asking you to do. Are we asking you to educate 180 people in the course of a day? Like, does that feel humane? Like, I think the questions around the value of my being and the value of our time together as people, that has to come first. And for me to give you, hey, here's a tool that can plan a lesson in 60 seconds, is not interrogating the situation quite as adeptly as I think we should be as humans in 2024. We should have a very critical lens on what we're doing with our time, especially now that AI can do all of our verbal production. And so I think instead of saying here's something that's going to make your life easier, your work easier, we should be asking, what do you want to do with your life? And what do you want to do with your impact on these children that you're entrusted with? And start from there. So in contrast to Magic School, which literally said you're the last 20%, I would say you're the foundation. And until you know yourself and your values and you are able to articulate them, then what AI's role is kind of erasing that part. That has to be, that's why I would be a great teacher for somebody, and Kunal would be an even better teacher for that person, is because we're different, and so if we're saying 80% is AI generated, you're getting to that homogeneity of language that people talk about, homogeneity of teaching and learning. And so we don't really believe that's the best path. We should start with our human core and work outward.
And I think something like Flint, which I don't know if you're familiar with Flint
No.
K-12. Yeah, so Flint is something that both Wes and I think have the opposite opinion about, because what Flint does is Flint actually creates personas, AI personas, that students then in a Socratic way interrogate and ask questions of and start to walk a path with. And then the teacher is the facilitator in that sense. So the teacher kind of guides along, again, the triangle, right? So the teacher guides alongside the student and this kind of Socratic partner that they have. And so again, reimagining what a teacher is, and again, we're talking specifically in a very US centric context here, where we're talking about teachers are like instructional delivery units, or what, I don't know, whatever we say, whatever they are, like, it's far more of that rather than the human element, where because of all the rules and regulations, and again, I don't know what it looks like in other places, which is again another question that Wes and I are sort of wrestling with, is how do we elevate what's going on outside of the US as models for what we could learn from, because in the end, something like Flint, School AI is a little bit like that as well. Again, not like Magic School. But in the end, I think this is sort of like one of the canonical things that we say, is we have been, in a way, brainwashed to believe that our value as humans is the megabytes of data we produce every day, the number of slide decks we produce, the spreadsheets, the documents, the PDFs. That's our value as a human. But those are just bits and bytes through cables. Those are just ones and zeros through the atmosphere. There's nothing human about a spreadsheet, about an Excel file, about a PDF. There's nothing human about that. But an AI model will never, ever be able to hold the hand of a child who just lost their parent.
Right.
Never. An AI model will never be able to laugh so hard that it can't stop laughing. And it wants to stop laughing, but it can't stop laughing. Those are human things. And as teachers and as educators, we have an opportunity to be human if we let AI do the bits and bytes for us, and we infuse our own selves into how it's developing those bits and bytes. We get to reconnect with likely the reason why most of us got into teaching to begin with, which is to be a human and to connect with other humans. And so that's where, when you're thinking about AI tools, for me, that's the first lens to look at it. Is it elevating my humanity? Is it elevating who I am and what I care about in the classroom? And if it is not, and it is simply taking over bits and bytes, and then I just need to proofread what comes out, well, is that really relevant for teaching? That might be great for an accountant, but is that okay for teaching? Probably not.
Kunal and Wes, thank you very much for what you're doing, and not only that, but the why that you're doing it. You've got a great heart, both of you, behind what you're doing. Thank you very much for giving us your time this morning as well.
Absolutely.
Thank
It
you.
was a pleasure
Yes,
speaking with you.
so grateful.
Yeah.